Captain Marcus Chen had seen many things in his 23 years of deep space exploration, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him aboard the Galactic Council's flagship Harmony. The massive vessel stretched for kilometers, its gleaming hull reflecting the light of distant stars as it drifted through the neutral zone between human and Zephyrian space. The diplomatic meeting had been arranged after months of delicate negotiations. First contact with the Zephyrians had gone smoothly enough. They were a peaceful, highly advanced species that valued art, philosophy, and scientific achievement above all else. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, and their society had achieved a level of harmony that Earth's politicians could only dream of. Marcus stepped through the airlock, his boots echoing on the pristine metallic floor. The Zephyrian delegation stood waiting in the vast reception hall, their tall, elegant forms draped in flowing robes that seemed to shift color with their movements. At the center of the group stood Ambassador Lyralii, her silver hair cascading down her back like liquid starlight. "Captain Chen," she said, her voice melodic and warm. "Welcome aboard the Harmony. We are honored by your presence." Marcus bowed slightly, following the protocols his diplomatic team had drilled into him. "The honor is mine, Ambassador. Earth is grateful for this opportunity to strengthen our friendship." Behind him, his crew filed in: Commander Sarah Walsh, his second-in-command, Dr. James Patterson, the xenobiologist, and Lieutenant Alex Rivera, their communications specialist. They had all undergone extensive cultural sensitivity training, but Marcus could still see the awe in their eyes as they took in their surroundings. The reception hall was breathtaking. Crystalline walls pulsed with soft bioluminescent patterns, and floating gardens drifted through the air, their exotic flowers releasing sweet fragrances that seemed to calm the mind. Everything was designed with an aesthetic perfection that spoke to the Zephyrians' refined sensibilities. "Your ship is magnificent," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "The integration of organic and technological elements is unlike anything we've seen." Ambassador Lyralii's eyes, large and violet, with an otherworldly depth, seemed to sparkle with pleasure. "You are kind to say so. We believe that beauty and function should exist in harmony, just as all sentient beings should coexist peacefully throughout the galaxy." The formal proceedings began with a tour of the ship's key areas. Marcus and his team were shown the botanical gardens, where impossible geometries created spaces that seemed larger on the inside than the outside. They visited the science laboratories, where Zephyrian researchers worked on projects that could benefit all member species of the Galactic Council. Throughout the tour, Marcus found himself drawn to Ambassador Lyralii. She moved with a grace that seemed to defy gravity, and her knowledge of seemingly every subject was both impressive and humbling. When she spoke about her people's achievements in renewable energy or their breakthroughs in consciousness transfer technology, her passion was infectious. "Your species has accomplished so much in such a short time since joining Galactic Society," she told him as they stood before a massive viewing port that showed the swirling colors of a nearby nebula. "We have been watching your progress with great interest." "We're still learning," Marcus replied. "Earth has its challenges, but we're working to overcome them. Your people's example gives us hope for what we might achieve." Dr. Patterson, who had been quietly recording everything for his research, stepped forward with obvious excitement. "Ambassador, if I may ask, the biological enhancements I've observed in your crew, the longevity treatments, the neural interfaces, are these available to all Zephyrians?" Lyralii turned her attention to the doctor, and Marcus noticed how the light seemed to catch her features in a way that made her appear almost luminescent. "Indeed, Dr. Patterson. We believe that all beings deserve the opportunity to reach their full potential. Physical limitations should not constrain the growth of the mind or spirit." As they continued through the ship, Marcus learned more about Zephyrian society. They had eliminated poverty, disease, and conflict centuries ago. Their citizens could live for thousands of Earth years, their minds growing ever sharper while their bodies remained youthful and strong. They had mastered faster-than-light travel, terraforming, and even limited time manipulation. The formal diplomatic sessions took place in a circular chamber where representatives from dozens of species sat in perfect acoustic harmony. Marcus presented humanity's proposals for technological exchange and mutual defense agreements. The Zephyrians listened with polite attention, asking insightful questions that demonstrated their genuine interest in helping Earth advance. During a break in the proceedings, Marcus found himself alone with Ambassador Lyralii in one of the ship's meditation gardens. The space was designed to promote reflection, with flowing water features and plants that responded to emotional states by changing their colors and scents. "Tell me about Earth," she said, settling gracefully onto a bench that seemed to mold itself to her form. "Not the official reports we've received, but your personal experience. What is it like to live on a world still finding its way?" Marcus sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. "It's chaotic, sometimes frustrating. We have incredible diversity not just in our species, but in our cultures, our beliefs, our approaches to problems. Sometimes that leads to conflict, but it also drives innovation and creativity in ways that surprise even us." "Fascinating," she murmured. "We achieved unity long ago, but sometimes I wonder what we might have lost in the process. Your species retains something wild, something unpredictable. There is beauty in that uncertainty." As the day progressed, Marcus began to notice small details about the Zephyrians that hadn't been immediately apparent. Despite their advanced technology and refined culture, there was something almost rehearsed about their interactions. Conversations followed predictable patterns, and their responses to unexpected situations seemed carefully calculated rather than spontaneous. It wasn't until the evening reception that the moment arrived which would change everything. The celebration took place in the ship's grand ballroom, where representatives from across the galaxy mingled beneath a ceiling that displayed real-time images of distant star systems. Music that seemed to resonate directly with the listeners' emotions filled the air, and servers glided between the guests offering delicacies from 100 different worlds. Marcus was engaged in conversation with a group of Andromedan trade ministers when he overheard Lieutenant Rivera speaking with Commander Walsh near the refreshment station. "I have to admit," Rivera was saying, his voice carrying further than he probably intended in the acoustically perfect chamber, "for all their technological advancement, the Zephyrians are kind of predictable, aren't they? Beautiful, sure, but it's like they're all carved from the same perfect template. Where's the variety, the individual character?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. The comment was exactly the kind of cultural insensitivity that could damage delicate diplomatic relationships. He started to move toward his officers to intervene, but he was too late. Ambassador Lyralii had been passing nearby and had clearly heard every word. She stopped, her violet eyes finding Rivera across the crowded room. For a moment, her perfect composure seemed to waver, and Marcus saw something flicker across her features: surprise, perhaps, or maybe hurt. The conversation around them began to fade as other guests noticed the sudden tension. Rivera, realizing his mistake, had gone pale. Commander Walsh placed a warning hand on his arm, but the damage was already done. Marcus moved quickly to where Lyralii stood, his mind racing as he tried to think of how to salvage the situation. An insult to the ambassador's appearance might seem trivial to human sensibilities, but different species had different concepts of honor and dignity. The Zephyrians' refined nature might make them particularly sensitive to such comments. "Ambassador," he began, "I apologize for my officer's inappropriate remarks." Lieutenant Rivera spoke without thinking, and his words don't represent, but Lyralii held up a graceful hand, stopping him mid-sentence. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the now quiet ballroom, and there was something in her tone that Marcus had never heard before, not hurt or anger, but something far more intriguing. "Captain Chen, there is no need for apologies," she said, her eyes never leaving Rivera's face. "Your lieutenant has made an observation that, while bluntly stated, touches on something my people have discussed among ourselves for generations." The entire ballroom had gone silent now. Even the ambient music had faded to a whisper. Marcus felt as though he were standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether they were about to fall into diplomatic disaster or discover something entirely unexpected. Lyralii moved through the crowd with fluid grace, each step deliberate and measured. When she reached Rivera, she studied his face with an intensity that made the young lieutenant visibly uncomfortable. "Tell me, Lieutenant Rivera," she said softly, "when you look at my people, what do you see?" Rivera swallowed hard, his career likely flashing before his eyes. I see incredible beauty, Ambassador. Perfection in every aspect. Intelligence, grace, harmony. And yet you find us predictable," she continued. "You see us as carved from the same template. Please, speak honestly. This is important." Marcus watched the exchange with growing fascination. There was something happening here that went beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. Lyreliai's question wasn't rhetorical, she genuinely wanted to understand Rivera's perspective. Rivera struggled with his words, clearly aware that dozens of alien dignitaries were hanging on his every syllable. I suppose what I meant was that your people seem to have achieved a level of perfection that's almost uniform? Like, there's no awkwardness, no rough edges, no unpredictable quirks. It's beautiful, but it's also safe. Lyreliai finished for him. Predictable. Without the spark of chaos that drives true creativity and growth. The admission sent ripples of surprised murmurs through the crowd. Marcus realized that this conversation had moved far beyond his lieutenant's careless comment. It was touching on something fundamental about Zephyrian society. For over 3,000 years, Lyreliai continued, her voice gaining strength, my people have pursued perfection in all things. We eliminated disease, extended our lifespans, enhanced our mental capabilities, and created a society of unparalleled harmony. But, in our quest for perfection, we may have lost something essential, the beautiful unpredictability that comes from embracing our flaws. She turned to address the entire gathering, her violet eyes blazing with an intensity that seemed to illuminate the entire ballroom. Lieutenant Rivera's observation, crude though it may have been, has forced me to confront a truth that many of us have been avoiding. We have become so refined, so perfect, that we have lost the capacity for genuine surprise even to ourselves. The response to her words was immediate and dramatic. Some of the alien dignitaries began animated discussions in their native languages, while others watched in stunned silence. But it was the reaction of the other Zephyrians that truly caught Marcus's attention. For the first time since he had met them, he saw genuine, unguarded emotion on their faces. Some looked shocked, others intrigued, and a few seemed almost relieved, as though Lyreliai had given voice to thoughts they had been harboring but were afraid to express. This gathering was meant to discuss trade agreements and mutual defense pacts, Lyreliai said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. But perhaps the most valuable exchange we could have today is one of perspectives. What can we learn from species that have not yet achieved our level of technological advancement? What wisdom exists in the chaos and unpredictability that we have so carefully eliminated from our own society? She looked directly at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that took his breath away, not the serene confidence he had come to associate with the Zephyrians, but genuine uncertainty and curiosity. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, human in a way that transcended species. Captain Shen, she said, I would like to propose an addition to our formal negotiations. Along with our technological exchanges, I believe our peoples could benefit from a cultural exchange program. Young Zephyrians could live on Earth, experiencing the beautiful chaos of your society, while humans could visit our world to see what perfection might offer and what it might cost. The suggestion was unprecedented. Never before had the Zephyrians shown interest in anything other than technological or scientific cooperation. Marcus realized that Rivera's careless comment had inadvertently opened a door that had been closed for millennia. Ambassador, he said carefully, such a program would require extensive planning and consideration from both our governments. Of course, she replied, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. But I believe it could be beneficial to both our species. Perhaps it is time for the Zephyrians to remember what it means to be imperfect. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself in deeper conversations with Zephyrian representatives than he had thought possible. They asked probing questions about human art, music, literature, all areas where the chaotic, imperfect nature of humanity created works of surprising beauty and power. Dr. Patterson was in his element, discussing the role of genetic diversity in human evolution and how their resistance to genetic standardization had actually strengthened the species in unexpected ways. Commander Walsh found herself explaining military tactics that relied on improvisation and individual initiative rather than perfect coordination. But it was the conversation between Rivera and a group of young Zephyrians that truly highlighted the shift that was taking place. Instead of diplomatic courtesy, there was genuine curiosity and excitement as they discussed the differences between their societies. On Earth, Rivera was saying, we have a saying, nobody's perfect. It used to be seen as making excuses for failures, but maybe there's deeper wisdom there. Maybe perfection isn't the goal, maybe growth is. One of the young Zephyrians, whose name was difficult for human tongues to pronounce, leaned forward with obvious interest. But surely efficiency and harmony are valuable goals? Your species struggles with conflict, with inequality, with so many problems we solved long ago. That's true, Rivera admitted. But those struggles also drive us to innovate, to create, to find new solutions. Some of our greatest achievements have come from people who weren't satisfied with the way things were, who pushed boundaries and broke rules. As Marcus listened to these exchanges, he began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. A careless comment about appearance had evolved into a fundamental discussion about the nature of progress and perfection. More importantly, it had revealed cracks in the Zephyrians' seemingly flawless society, cracks that suggested a deep longing for something they had lost in their quest for perfection. When the reception finally ended, Lyralii approached Marcus as he prepared to return to his ship. "Captain," she said quietly, "I want to thank your lieutenant for his honesty, even if it was unintentionally delivered. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help us see ourselves clearly." "Ambassador," Marcus replied, "I think this conversation has been valuable for all of us. Your response to what could have been a diplomatic incident shows wisdom that goes beyond technological advancement." She smiled, and, for a moment, she looked almost human, vulnerable, hopeful, and beautifully imperfect. "Tomorrow we begin the formal negotiations," she said. "But I suspect that the real work, the important work, began tonight with a simple observation about appearance. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest moments." As Marcus returned to his quarters aboard his own ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had witnessed something historic. A comment meant as casual conversation had opened a dialogue that could reshape the relationship between their species. More than that, it had challenged both humans and Zephyrians to question their fundamental assumptions about progress, perfection, and what it truly meant to evolve as a species. The universe, Marcus reflected, had a way of surprising even the most advanced civilizations. And sometimes, just sometimes, those surprises came from the most unexpected sources, like a young lieutenant who spoke without thinking and an ambassador brave enough to listen without taking offense. The real negotiations, he suspected, were just beginning. 3 months had passed since the initial diplomatic meeting aboard the Harmony, and the formal negotiations had taken an unexpected turn. What began as routine trade discussions had evolved into something far more complex and potentially revolutionary. The cultural exchange program that Ambassador Lyralii had proposed was now being seriously considered by both governments, but implementation was proving more challenging than anyone had anticipated. Marcus stood on the observation deck of Earth's newest diplomatic station, New Geneva, watching as Zephyrian and human vessels moved in careful choreography around the neutral facility. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a joint project that combined human ingenuity with Zephyrian technology to create something neither species could have achieved alone. "Captain," Commander Walsh approached, her tablet displaying the latest reports. "The preliminary psychological evaluations are complete. The selection committee has identified potential candidates for the exchange program, but there are concerns." Marcus turned from the viewport, noting the tension in his second-in-command's expression. "What kind of concerns?" "The Zephyrian volunteers are interesting choices," Walsh said carefully. "They're not the usual diplomatic or scientific personnel we'd expect. According to their profiles, several of them have been flagged by their own society as exhibiting nonconformist tendencies. One was actually removed from a research position for disruptive innovation practices." "And our volunteers?" "A mix of scientists, artists, and military personnel. But here's the thing, they all scored high on psychological adaptability tests, but also on something the Zephyrians are calling chaos tolerance. Apparently, they've developed new metrics to measure a being's ability to function in unpredictable environments." Marcus nodded slowly. The implications were significant. They're not just looking for cultural observers. They want people who can actually adapt to radically different ways of thinking. Before Walsh could respond, the station's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. The holographic display materialized to show Ambassador Lyralii, but something was different about her appearance. Her typically perfect posture seemed more relaxed, and there was an energy in her eyes that Marcus hadn't seen during their first meeting. "Captain Chen, Commander Walsh," she said, her melodic voice carrying an undercurrent of excitement. I hope you can join me in Conference Room 7. We have developments regarding the exchange program that require immediate discussion. The conference room was a study in contrasts when Marcus and his team arrived. Half of the space followed standard human design principles, functional furniture, practical lighting, and multiple displays showing relevant data. The other half embodied Zephyrian aesthetics, flowing organic curves, bioluminescent accents, and surfaces that seemed to respond to the emotional state of those nearby. Lyralii stood at the center of the room, but she wasn't alone. Beside her was a Zephyrian that Marcus hadn't met before, taller than most, with silver markings along his temples that indicated advanced age, and eyes that held a sharpness that seemed almost predatory. "Captain, may I present Research Director Valeris," Lyralii said. "He has been overseeing the psychological and sociological analysis of our exchange candidates." Valeris stepped forward, his movement precise but somehow less graceful than typical Zephyrian motion. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge that immediately commanded attention. "Captain Chen, your species presents us with a fascinating paradox," he began without preamble. "Your technological development is crude by our standards, your social structures chaotic, and your individual behavioral patterns completely unpredictable. By all rational analysis, you should be far less successful than you actually are." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure whether to be insulted or flattered." "Be neither," Valeris replied with what might have been a smile. "Be curious. Because we have discovered something about your species that challenges fundamental assumptions we have held for millennia." The research director moved to one of the room's displays, which immediately lit up with complex data patterns. Charts, graphs, and three-dimensional models filled the air, showing comparative analysis between human and Zephyrian cognitive patterns. Our initial studies focused on intelligence metrics, problem-solving capacity, memory retention, processing speed. In these areas, enhanced Zephyrians score consistently higher than unmodified humans. However, when we introduced variables requiring adaptive creativity and innovative thinking, something remarkable happened. The display shifted to show problem-solving scenarios. Marcus watched as human test subjects tackled challenges in ways that seemed chaotic and inefficient compared to the systematic approaches used by Zephyrians. Yet the human solutions often proved more effective in the long run. "Your people don't just think outside the box," Valeris continued, his excitement growing apparent. "You seem to be fundamentally unaware that the box exists. Where we see obstacles, you see opportunities. Where we calculate optimal solutions, you discover possibilities we never considered." Commander Walsh leaned forward, studying the data. "Are you saying that our apparent disadvantages are actually strengths?" "More than that," Lyralii interjected. "We're beginning to suspect that our pursuit of perfection may have eliminated crucial capabilities that your species has retained. The very chaos and unpredictability that Lieutenant Rivera observed might be the source of humanity's greatest strength." Dr. Patterson, who had been quietly analyzing the displayed data, suddenly straightened. "The neural pathway variations, they're not random, are they? There's an underlying pattern to human cognitive diversity that your models couldn't predict." Valeris nodded approvingly. "Precisely. Human brains have retained genetic and environmental factors that create genuine cognitive diversity. Each individual processes information differently, leading to a species-wide intelligence that is greater than the sum of its parts. While we," Lyralii added with a note of what might have been regret, "have optimized individual intelligence at the cost of collective creativity. Our perfect minds think in perfect patterns, but perfection, it seems, can be a limitation." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "You're not just interested in cultural exchange. You're studying us because you think we have something you've lost." "Something we deliberately eliminated," Valeris confirmed. "Our genetic enhancement programs removed the flaws that created cognitive diversity. Our social systems discourage the kind of chaotic thinking that leads to breakthrough innovations. We achieved perfection, but at a cost we're only now beginning to understand." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus realized they were discussing more than just an exchange program, they were talking about the fundamental direction of two entire civilizations. "There's more," Lyralii said quietly. The volunteers from our society, the ones your Commander Walsh mentioned as having nonconformist tendencies, they represent something we thought we had eliminated completely. She moved to another display, showing genetic analysis and psychological profiles. These individuals carry dormant genetic sequences that our enhancement programs were designed to suppress. Somehow, these traits have begun to reassert themselves in recent generations. Evolution finding a way? Patterson suggested. Perhaps, Valeries replied. Or perhaps the universe itself has a bias toward diversity and chaos. Either way, these individuals represent our best hope of understanding what we've lost and whether it's possible to reclaim it. Marcus studied the profiles of the Zephyrian volunteers. Each one showed patterns of thinking and behavior that deviated from their species' norm. They were artists who created works that disturbed rather than soothed, scientists who pursued research their peers considered wasteful, and engineers who built things that worked but violated aesthetic principles. They're the closest thing to human thinking that your species has produced, he realized. Exactly, Lyralii confirmed. And your volunteers represent the most adaptable examples of human diversity. If our theory is correct, the exchange between these specific individuals could provide insights that benefit both our species. Commander Walsh cleared her throat. With respect, ambassadors, what you're proposing sounds like it could fundamentally alter the development of both our civilizations. The political implications alone are staggering, Valeries agreed. Which is why we must proceed carefully. But, consider the alternative, continued stagnation for my people, and potential limitation for yours as you inevitably face the same choices about enhancement and optimization that we made millennia ago. Marcus walked to the viewport, looking out at the ships from both civilizations. Human vessels were functional, purpose-built machines that showed the wear and improvisation of constant use. Zephyrian ships were works of art that seemed to have materialized from some perfect dream. Both approaches had their merits, but he was beginning to understand that the universe might be large enough for multiple definitions of progress. There's something I don't understand, he said, turning back to the group. If your people have known about these issues for some time, why are you just addressing them now? What changed? Lyralii and Valeries exchanged a look that spoke of complex internal politics and carefully guarded secrets. Lieutenant Rivera's comment, Lyralii said simply. Not the words themselves, but my reaction to them. For the first time in centuries, a Zephyrian responded to criticism with curiosity rather than dismissal. That moment of genuine, unguarded emotion created ripples throughout our society. Ripples? Patterson asked. Young Zephyrians began asking questions, Valeries explained. Questions about whether perfection was truly perfect, whether our achievements were worth what we had sacrificed to attain them. The ruling council initially tried to suppress these discussions, but the ideas had already taken root. Marcus felt a growing sense of the magnitude of what was happening. You're talking about a philosophical revolution. We're talking about evolution, Lyralii corrected. The exchange program isn't just about understanding each other's cultures. It's about discovering whether two radically different approaches to civilization can learn from each other without losing what makes them unique. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering practical details of the exchange program and the safeguards needed to protect volunteers from both species. But Marcus found his attention repeatedly drawn to the deeper implications of what they were attempting. As the session concluded, Lyralii approached him privately. Captain, there's something else you should know. The individuals we're sending, they're volunteers in the truest sense. They're risking everything to participate in this program. If they return changed, if they bring back ideas that challenge our fundamental social structures, they could face exile or worse. Marcus studied her face, seeing the weight of responsibility she carried. And yet you're willing to risk it. Because the alternative is stagnation, she replied. A perfect society that can never grow, never change, never discover anything truly new. Lieutenant Rivera called us predictable, and he was right. We become so afraid of chaos that we've forgotten how to truly live. What about you? Marcus asked. Are you just an observer in this process, or are you also changing? Lyralii's smile was radiant and somehow heartbreakingly vulnerable. Captain, I haven't felt this uncertain, this hopeful, this alive in over 300 years.
Your lieutenant's careless comment didn't just insult my appearance, it awakened something in me that I thought was lost forever.
As Marcus returned to his quarters that evening, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this point. A thoughtless comment about physical appearance had somehow evolved into a program that could reshape the future of two entire civilizations. But, more than that, it had revealed something profound about the nature of progress itself.
Perhaps true advancement wasn't about eliminating flaws and achieving perfection.
Perhaps it was about embracing the beautiful chaos of diversity and finding strength in the very imperfections that made life unpredictable and wonderful.
The exchange program would begin in just a few weeks.
Humans would travel to a world of perfect harmony to discover what they might become, while Zephyrians would venture into the chaotic beauty of human civilization to remember what they had lost. And, somewhere in that exchange, Marcus suspected, both species would discover truths about themselves that they never could have found alone. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Who would have thought that the key to unlocking the future lay not in achieving perfection, but in celebrating the magnificent imperfection that made every moment unpredictable and every discovery a source of wonder? 1 year had passed since the first exchange participants had begun their journeys between worlds, and Captain Marcuschan stood in what had once been the sterile conference room aboard New Geneva. The space had transformed dramatically, reflecting the profound changes taking place across both human and Zephyrian societies. Where perfect geometric patterns had once dominated the Zephyrian section, there were now irregular sculptures created by the exchange participants' human-Zephyrian collaborations that somehow managed to be both chaotic and harmonious. The human section, meanwhile, had gained flowing lines and bioluminescent elements that responded to the emotional states of those present, creating an atmosphere that was both functional and beautiful.
Marcus wasn't alone.
The room had filled with an unprecedented gathering of representatives from both species, along with observers from dozens of other galactic civilizations who had been watching the exchange program with intense interest. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Lyralii, but she was almost unrecognizable from the perfect figure who had first greeted him aboard the Harmony. Her silver hair now showed deliberate asymmetry, not a flaw, but an artistic choice that spoke to her newfound appreciation for imperfection. Her robes, while still elegant, displayed patterns that shifted unpredictably rather than following mathematical precision. Most striking of all were her eyes, which had lost their serene certainty and gained something far more valuable, genuine curiosity and the spark of someone who was still discovering who they could become. "Captain Shen," she said, approaching him with a smile that was bright with excitement, "I trust you're prepared for some surprises. The results of our exchange program have exceeded our most optimistic projections." Before Marcus could respond, the room's central display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of known space. Red indicators marked human colonies and installations, blue showed Zephyrian territories, and new green markers indicated something entirely unprecedented: joint settlements where humans and Zephyrians were working together on projects that neither species could have accomplished alone. Dr. Patterson, now sporting bioluminescent tattoos that he'd acquired during his stay on the Zephyrian homeworld, stepped forward to address the gathering. His appearance was startling. The precise, clinical scientist had become someone who moved with an almost artistic grace, his enhanced perception allowing him to see patterns in data that had previously been invisible. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," he began, his voice carrying new confidence, "what we've discovered through this program challenges fundamental assumptions about evolution, consciousness, and the nature of intelligence itself." The display shifted to show comparative brain scans of the exchange participants, before and after their experiences. The changes were remarkable. Human participants showed new neural pathways that enhanced their ability to process complex patterns, while Zephyrian participants had developed areas of the brain associated with creative intuition and emotional spontaneity. The human volunteers who spent time in Zephyrian society didn't just learn new technologies, Patterson continued. They experienced cognitive enhancement that preserved their essential humanity while expanding their capabilities. Meanwhile, Zephyrian participants who immersed themselves in human culture rediscovered neural plasticity they thought was lost forever. Lieutenant Rivera, now bearing the rank of commander after his unexpected role in initiating these changes, stood to present his findings. His confidence had grown tremendously, but he retained the directness that had started this entire journey.
The most significant discovery, Rivera announced, is that neither perfection nor chaos represents the optimal path for civilization. The answer lies in dynamic balance systems that can shift between order and creativity as circumstances require. The display showed video feeds from the joint settlements. In one, human engineers and Zephyrian artists were designing starships that defied conventional aesthetics while incorporating technologies neither species had imagined independently. Another showed mixed research teams working on medical breakthroughs that combined human adaptability with Zephyrian precision. But it was the final feed that truly captured the magnitude of what was happening. Children, both human and Zephyrian, played together in an educational facility designed to nurture both logical thinking and creative expression. They spoke in hybrid languages that incorporated elements from both cultures, and their games required both strategic planning and spontaneous adaptation. The next generation, Lyralii observed softly, will grow up understanding that diversity isn't just tolerable, it's essential for true advancement. Research director Valeris, who had undergone his own transformation during the exchange program, activated a new set of displays showing long-term projections for both civilizations. We have identified what we're calling the enhancement paradox, he explained. Every civilization that achieves significant technological advancement faces the same choice: optimize for perfection and risk stagnation, or maintain diversity and accept apparent inefficiency. We believed these were the only options. The projections showed branching paths for civilizational development. Some led to the crystalline perfection that Zephyrians had achieved: beautiful, harmonious, and ultimately static. Others led to chaotic advancement that eventually collapsed under its own contradictions. But the exchange program has revealed a third path, Valeris continued, his excitement evident. Dynamic optimization, systems that can shift between different modes of operation based on circumstances and objectives. Perfection when precision is required, creativity when innovation is needed, and the wisdom to know which approach fits each situation. Commander Walsh, who had spent 6 months helping to establish the first joint colony, stepped forward to share her experiences. Like the others, she had been changed by the program, her military precision now balanced with an intuitive understanding of alien psychology that made her an incredibly effective diplomat. The practical applications are already exceeding our expectations, she reported. Human Zephyrian engineering teams have solved energy problems that had stymied both our species independently. Joint research initiatives have made breakthroughs in fields ranging from consciousness transfer to faster-than-light communication. The displays showed technical readouts that would have been incomprehensible to either species working alone, but which represented revolutionary advances when human innovation combined with Zephyrian sophistication. More importantly, Walsh continued, we're seeing the emergence of new cultural forms that honor both traditions while creating something entirely novel. Art that teaches, technology that inspires, philosophy that practically improves lives. An unexpected voice interrupted the presentations. Young Lieutenant Chen, no relation to Marcus, one of the youngest participants in the exchange program, who had spent time with Zephyrian families learning their approach to education and personal development. With respect to the senior officers, she said, her voice carrying new authority, I think we're missing the most important discovery of all. All attention turned to her as she stood, her posture showing the influence of Zephyrian grace training while retaining distinctly human directness. The exchange program didn't just teach us about each other's cultures, she continued. It taught us about ourselves. Every human participant discovered capabilities they never knew they had, while every Zephyrian participant rediscovered aspects of themselves they thought were lost forever. She gestured to the mixed group of exchange participants, human and Zephyrian alike, who had formed relationships and working partnerships that transcended species boundaries. We learned that growth isn't about choosing between perfection and chaos. It's about recognizing that every individual, every culture, every species has the potential to become more than they currently are. The question isn't whether to enhance or to preserve, it's how to create systems that allow for continuous evolution while honoring what makes each being unique. Marcus found himself deeply moved by the young officer's words. The exchange program had grown far beyond its original scope, becoming something that offered hope not just for human-Zephyrian relations, but for all the species struggling with questions of advancement and identity. As if reading his thoughts, a new voice joined the conversation. Ambassador Kethvar from the Andromedan Collective, whose species had been observing the exchange program with intense interest.
Captain Chen, Ambassador Lyralii, the crystalline being said, its voice resonating with harmonic overtones. The Andromedan Collective formally requests to participate in an expanded version of this exchange program. Our species has faced similar challenges regarding optimization and diversity, and we believe we could benefit from the insights you've discovered. Similar requests began coming from representatives of other species throughout the room. The cetacean minds wanted to understand how aquatic intelligence could be integrated with humanoid thinking patterns. The silicon-based architects were interested in how organic chaos could inspire new forms of crystalline beauty. Even the enigmatic energy beings expressed curiosity about embodied experience and emotional spontaneity. Marcus realized they were witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented, not just an alliance between two species, but the foundation of a new approach to galactic civilization itself. Ambassador Lyralii moved to the center of the room, her presence commanding attention from every being present. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had undergone fundamental transformation and emerged stronger for it. 1 year ago, she began, Lieutenant Rivera made what he considered a careless comment about appearance. He observed that my people had become predictable, lacking individual character. At the time, those words could have destroyed diplomatic relations between our species. She paused, her gaze finding Rivera in the crowd and offering him a smile of genuine gratitude. Instead, they became the catalyst for the most important discovery either of our species has made in millennia. We learned that true strength comes not from eliminating differences, but from celebrating and integrating them. We discovered that perfection is not a destination, but a dynamic process of growth and adaptation.
The room fell silent as the implications of her words settled over the assembled representatives.
Today, I propose we formalize what has already begun organically, Lyralii continued. The establishment of the Galactic Diversity Initiative, a collaborative framework where species can share their unique approaches to existence while learning from others. Not cultural assimilation, but cultural symphonia, different voices creating harmony through their differences rather than uniformity. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species stood to express their support for the initiative, offering their own unique perspectives and capabilities to the growing alliance. Marcus felt a profound sense of completion as he watched the fruits of an accidental comment blossom into something that could reshape galactic civilization. But it was Ambassador Lyralii's final words that truly took his breath away. Captain Chen, she said, approaching him as the formal session concluded and the room buzzed with excited planning discussions, there's something I need to tell you about that first evening, when Lieutenant Rivera made his observation about our appearance. Marcus looked at her curiously, noting the slight nervousness in her demeanor, an emotion that the perfectly composed diplomat of a year ago would never have displayed. I never told you why his words affected me so profoundly, she continued. It wasn't just because he challenged our cultural assumptions. It was because, for the first time in 3 centuries, someone looked at me and saw not the perfect ambassador, not the idealized representative of my species, but a person who could grow and change and become something more than what she currently was. She paused, her violet eyes reflecting depths of emotion that would have been impossible for her species before the exchange program. Your lieutenant's careless comment about appearance taught me that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in potential. Not in what we are, but in what we might become if we have the courage to embrace uncertainty and growth. Marcus felt his own breath catch as he understood the profound personal transformation that had paralleled the broader diplomatic and social changes. What I'm trying to say, Lyralii continued with a smile that was radiant in its imperfection, is that the response Lieutenant Rivera inspired in me wasn't just diplomatic or intellectual. For the first time in my very long life, I discovered what it means to be beautifully, wonderfully, magnificently unpredictable. As Marcus looked around the room at the unprecedented gathering of species working together on plans that would have been unthinkable just a year ago, he realized that Lieutenant Rivera's careless comment had indeed taken everyone's breath away, not through offense or diplomatic crisis, but by opening possibilities that none of them had imagined. The universe, it seemed, had a wonderful sense of timing. Sometimes the most profound changes in galactic civilization began with the simplest human gesture, an honest observation made without filters or diplomatic calculation, delivered by someone brave enough to speak their truth and heard by someone wise enough to listen with genuine curiosity rather than defensive pride. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and chaotic and absolutely beautiful in its unlimited potential. And, at its heart was a lesson that would echo through the ages, that true advancement comes not from perfecting what we are, but from embracing who we might become when we have the courage to grow beyond our current limitations. The conversation about appearance had become a transformation of souls, and the galaxy would never be the same.